Okay, so let me give you a quick breakdown. This is me. This is some delicious mochi that I'm currently preparing. This is a review for Cooking Mama Cookstar for Nintendo Switch. And this is what happens when you get too overeager pounding your mochi.
Ouch!
I might need to play Trauma Center after this to figure out how to fix a crushed hand. How's it going, guys? I hope you are staying safe and doing well. I've been really excited about playing this ever since it was announced back in August. I've been a big fan of the Cooking Mama series since it first debuted 14 years ago. I played a lot of the entries on the DS. This is actually my first console entry, so I've been really excited to check it out. Honestly, the release for this game has been extremely puzzling. It has increased my fascination and also increased my worry for how the game would actually turn out. So back when the game was announced in August, the developers came out and said that the game was going to capitalize on using blockchain, which I'm not 100% familiar with what blockchain is, but just from a quick Google search, it basically has a lot to do with funding with Bitcoin. Having sat down with the game now and taking a look at it, I'm not 100% sure where the whole blockchain sort of idea came from or why it was even brought up in the first place. There's not even really anything as far as like DLC or anything listed out for this game, and I certainly didn't use Bitcoin to pay for it, so kind of a weird thing for them to bring up. But yeah, that's really only where the first bit of the oddities have really started. So the announcement was back in August of 2019. The trailer dropped February 18th of 2020 for a short amount of time. So the trailer was live on the game company's YouTube page, and shortly after it was made private. Obviously though, because this is the internet, you were still able to find the trailer in other places. Given that there really still wasn't a whole lot of other information announced about the game, I noticed that there was a web address that they had at the end of the trailer, so I decided, hey, I'll check out the game's website. When I put it into the browser though, it took me to a empty GoDaddy domain registration page where you could actually purchase the rights to cookingmamacookstar.com for like $90. Despite being really tempted just because I thought it was hilarious. Now, as of release, there is an official website up, but yeah, that was definitely pretty strange. Now, the other really weird part is that most retailers that I saw couldn't really figure out what day the game was supposed to release on. Walmart, for example, had it listed at March 30th. Target had it releasing on March 31st. There was just a bunch of different dates from different retailers, and no one really seemed to have a very clear answer. However, what was probably the most strange, as many of you know, there was a Nintendo Mini Direct on March 26th. There was no sort of announcement of the game. It wasn't shown off at all, even though the release date was fairly soon after. However, shortly after the Direct, the game actually went live on the eShop, and a lot of people thought that, oh, maybe it was just shadow dropped. But then the game was pulled. The game was pulled from the eShop, and as of now, the game has supposedly been out physically for 2 days, and it is still not actually listed on the eShop, which is really weird. Right now, it seems to be the only way you can actually play the game is with a physical copy. Whatever the reason for these oddities, I hope that the development team wasn't in any way affected by these current world happenings, that everyone is okay. Regardless of everything weird happening, I've had the game for a little while now. I want to go ahead and sit down and give you sort of my first impressions upon playing the game. So as a series veteran to the Cooking Mama series, let me explain the gameplay really quickly for those of you who may not be familiar with how the games play. So basically you have a bunch of different dishes, different types of foods that you can make, and the gameplay breaks down to a series of minigames. Think of something kind of halfway between Mario Party's minigames that take, 30 seconds to a minute, and the micro games in WarioWare that take place in less than 5 seconds. It's kind of somewhere in between. And basically you have a whole bunch of these series of mini games that take you through each of the different basic actions of creating a dish, whether it be chopping, grating, frying, all different types of things that go into actually preparing the food. The gameplay has not deviated hardly at all between all the different Cooking Mama entries. There may be some new additional activities or different ways to sort of vary up the gameplay, to make it more fun for minigame's sake. But for the most part, it's the gameplay has pretty much unwavered since the very first installment. What was so revolutionary about the original Cooking Mama on the DS was the way that the game actually utilized the touchscreen and the microphone to actually really make the way you were cooking feel intuitive. So what's different and what's so special about Cooking Mama Cookstar on the Switch? Well, after sitting down and playing the game for a couple of hours, here are some of my thoughts. The first thing that strikes me is the visuals. They're very colorful, they pop, and they are very faithful to the original graphics on the DS games. Mama looks just as bright and cheerful as always, a little bit weird for her head to be modeled in a 3D space instead of flat. But overall, the game's presentation, at least from the initial menu, is very nostalgic and quite nice to look at, actually. The graphics suffer a little bit in other areas. The hands that you use while you're cooking look like big clay blobs, and sometimes the food doesn't... It's stuck between this area of looking too realistic or not realistic enough. It's kind of uncanny valley, never really kind of hits like that sweet spot. The other thing that's really cool about this new entry is for the first time ever, they have added a vegetarian mode. Me personally, I am not actually a vegetarian, but I do have several people in my life that are. So seeing this new way that you can actually create dishes, because a lot of the dishes are the same between what they are calling the carnivore menu and the vegetarian menu, are actually pretty similar. It just takes you through the different steps of how you would actually prepare something differently when you're thinking about it in a vegetarian sense, which is really interesting, especially for someone like me who is not a vegetarian. I think this is definitely a fresh spin on the series. It doesn't really change up the gameplay very much, but the fact that you take different steps and how you actually prepare the dishes is a really interesting idea. Unfortunately, as much as I love Cooking Mama and I was really feeling very excited for this game carries a lot more problems with it than it actually does positives. First of all, number one complaint, Mama is annoying.
Mama's jelly. Don't forget to tag Mama. すごいね. Shaking my head.
There's no way of getting around it. The voice acting for the character of Mama has never been great, if I'm being honest. I mean, you know, it's always been cute and charming. This one, she just doesn't shut up. She has a retort for just about every single thing that happens. She'll even talk when you aren't doing things, just speak in the background. And they gave her a large number of very cringy things to say, which is hilarious. A lot of times I found myself actually laughing out loud at some of the things that she would say, like shaking my head, or she would say, Mama is jelly. Just different weird things like that. Yeah, it gets really, really annoying after a while. Fortunately, there is a way to get around this. They actually do have a setting where you can lower the volume of her voice, which felt weird doing that because, I mean, Mama has always talked consistently in all the previous entries, so it felt weird playing the game with it silent, but also at the same time, she just talks so much that it's like I felt kind of like I had to do it. The other thing, one of the really cool things about this version, which I know was a part of the few Cooking Mama Wii ports, is there are motion controls included. Motion controls seem like a really good idea for a game like this. I mean, you know, you can... there's lots of chopping, you can simulate greasing a pan, grating cheese, different things like that. However, the motion controls in this game are super wonky. I was never really able to focus the Joy-Con towards the center of the screen. It felt really hard to control things a lot of the times, which just honestly, like with Mama's annoying voice, it just really, it made me laugh more than anything. This is definitely a game that I think is fun to just goof around with people for a little bit. Beyond that, it's kind of shallow. Still, interesting ideas to use the motion controls for. It just doesn't really work as well in execution. My two other biggest complaints with the game is it has incredibly shallow multiplayer. There is a mode where two people can play called Potluck Party, where they have 10 different mini games that you can pass a Joy-Con to the other player and basically compete in these really, really short mini games against each other. The only way I can foreseeably fix this problem is if there were either more mini games to play, or if they just added a mode where you could just somehow either race your opponent or cook on stuff together. The funnest part about cooking with somebody else in real life is when you actually work together on stuff. And unfortunately, that's not really something that's incorporated into the multiplayer aspect of this game. It's just really short Mario Party style-esque mini games, and then once you've kind of blown through all 10 of those, that's pretty much all that there is. Lastly, my biggest gripe with this game is that it has a huge focus on social media. I personally don't have anything against social media. My personal gripe with the representation of social media in the game is that it is literally everywhere. After every single dish that you prepare, Mama has you arrange the dish and then take a photo, add a filter, add stickers, and then you post it to a website. The funny thing is that when you get ready to post it, it actually asks if you want to post it to your actual social media feed, and then the rating is based on how many likes you get. It's kind of clever. It's kind of cute how they integrate it, because these are all still things that would have been in an original Cooking Mama game, right? You finish a dish, you see how it looks presented on the plate, and then Mama would give you a rating. It's still basically the same thing. They just the theming is tied to social media, which it's clever at first, but it really kind of makes the game feel shallow in a way. But that's just my personal opinion. It works. It's kind of annoying and cumbersome to have to if you don't feel like taking a picture of your food and framing it every single time, you kind of have to just like button mash your way through the end. The gameplay overall is fun. These are simplistic games that are fun to just sit down, play with friends. It's not exactly the sort of game that you would spend hours and hours of time on. There are over 80 recipes in Cooking Mama Cookstar, but one feature that was in the first Cooking Mama that I wish they would bring back is Recipe Combine. You used to be able to make some really weird and sometimes just really disgusting combinations by picking two different recipes, and then the game would basically have you do the steps for both and sometimes mix them in really creative ways to just make some sort of abomination or monstrosity at the end. Something that I would have loved to have seen in this, especially with the different combinations of like the vegetarian and non-vegetarian dishes. I think it would have been something really cool to mess around with. So it's a shame that it doesn't return here. Honestly, if you're a huge fan of the franchise, I would say give it a shot, maybe especially if you can get it on sale. If watching this and hearing this doesn't seem like your kind of game, trying it for yourself is probably not going to persuade you. It's very simple. Basically, once you've done a few recipes, different recipes offer different mini games, so there's always something new to discover, but the gameplay loop is pretty similar all the way throughout. So those are my thoughts on Cooking Mama Cookstar for the Nintendo Switch. What are you guys' thoughts? Were you really excited for the game? Are you planning on picking up a copy? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you next time. But before I go, unironically, Mama for Smash.